Yeah, Maka. So we are live actually. How are you?
I'm fine. Good evening. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to be covering a couple of things today. Let's just invite the folks to join us already.
All right, I'll do that.
All right, thank you. All right. Hi guys. I can see some people are already in the audience. I just want to be sure you can hear me very clearly. So you know what? Go ahead, drop a message in the chat. Right. Let me know if you can hear me, guys. Okay, so I can see Kofi, I can see Emeka, Rosemary, um, Agu, Salako, Bernard. All right. When was the last time? When was the last time you had a class with me as the instructor? Hopefully, hopefully today's session will be amazing. So let's see how it goes with the class. I can see we just have 16 people here. Please invite the others on Discord, invite the others on WhatsApp so that we can get started. Today we are going to be talking about JavaScript, but I would also love to take some, feedback about your um, previous classes, and of course, to know if you also have any challenge regarding covering HTML and CSS. So you do me a favor, drop your complaints in the chat, right? Drop your complaints in the chat, and we'll have someone pick them up against the next session we have on Discord. Okay. All right, Maxwell. Good evening. Okay, so drop your complaints in the chat if you have something that you are still finding it difficult to understand. Right, drop it in the chat. And I have also noticed that most of us are not active on Discord. Right, so you should also learn to be active on Discord so that you can easily ask questions and get response on the fly. All right, so it's already 8:06. Let's go ahead and start. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so yes, I hope everyone can see my screen. We're covering introduction to JavaScript. Okay, so I can see some messages already. I see someone is saying responsiveness. I think we already have that on our list. Yes, so responsiveness is a bit difficult. I see most of you are having the same challenge with responsiveness, right? So please drop it on the chat. I'm sure I have some moderators on the call already. Um, yeah. Okay, so I'd like to understand how to work with components better. We need to be able to finish the class on best CSS practices. Okay, so when you say working with components, okay, I think I understand you. Okay, anyways, following the curriculum in the class, the assumption here is that even if you already know a lot of things around CSS, right, and working with, maybe some JavaScript frameworks, we actually have a curriculum that we're following, okay? So everyone has to follow up with the same curriculum, all right? So if you mean creating your CSS styles, right, for your buttons, for your cards, yes, we're going to cover some of those things, right? And that is why we're asking. So just drop what you want to understand better based on the classes that have been covered already. Okay. Yeah. So you can drop those details in the chat while I proceed with JavaScript. All right. So maybe you have heard of JavaScript before. You've heard of the major combo. You have your HTML, basically giving you the structure of your page, right? You have your CSS, giving you your styling. So you have your styling, and then you have JavaScript, giving you the behavior. All right. Okay. So JavaScript, of course, is a programming language, right? It's a programming language originally built, for the web, right? Originally built to, um, to add this behavior we're referring to here to your web pages. Okay, you have a simple web page, for example, and then you want to add some sort of actions, right? You want to perform some sort of action. So I have an example here. This is a button. When I can actually click on this button and it performs a particular action of displaying an alert, right? We'll get to see some of these things, but yes, that is an example of the behavior we're talking about here. All right. Um, in more recent times, of course, you can use JavaScript on the client side, which is your browser, as well as use JavaScript on the server side for building backend systems. We're going to cover that in some other class in the future, right? We actually have JavaScript and Node.js as part of the curriculum. So yes, we're going to be using JavaScript on both the front end, which is the client side, right, and the back end, which is the server side. All right, so just to explain this to avoid any sort of complexity, so when we say client side, we are referring to what the users would see, right? So what you see on your browser, okay? Of course, client side can also mean what you see on your mobile, right? Maybe your mobile browser, okay? So let's say mobile browser. All right, and then for the backend or for the server, we're basically referring to, let's just call this your backend server. That's what we mean by server side. So you can use JavaScript on both the server as well as using it on the client. And by the way, as I explained, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat. All right, so we can take it immediately. Okay, so this is noted, right? JavaScript. So let's say JavaScript, can be used on the client side and on the server side. All right, so let's come back to this. So say you have a simple web page, right, displaying some text, and you want to perform actions like, maybe sending some data, right, from your front end to your back end, maybe performing some actions using forms. right? Probably you want to do some kind of validation, input validation. You want to check if the user or the person using your website basically have put in the right set of data. You can actually do that with JavaScript, right? Um, yes, of course, HTML gives you some basic validation methods right from your HTML code, right? But then JavaScript is what you use to add even more advanced validation. Okay. So when we say JavaScript is a programming language, I mentioned that earlier. You're performing things like I'll give an assumption here. Your business is building a website, and they want you to maybe include a button, right, somewhere that says click here, click here, uh, to chat. So this is a very simple example. You're building a website, and then you have a button that says click here to chat. Now, for some reasons, before this chat will be active, you probably want to send a request. So when I say sending a request, you're basically trying to send a trigger, right? So you want to send a trigger, for example, to the backend, as I mentioned earlier. So let's call this our backend. And that particular request, you would have to do that with JavaScript. You can't do that with CSS, of course. That is just for styling. You can't do that with HTML. That is just your web page structure. So you have to have a mechanism for calling this guy, right, which is the backend server, that will then go ahead and respond to your application, to your JavaScript, right? It will respond to say, okay, this call was successful or it failed. Now that is a behavior that you've added to your web page, and that can be achieved with JavaScript. We're not speaking of frameworks. We're not talking about that yet. So the assumption is, you know, we're trying to understand, the fundamentals. What exactly can JavaScript do? All right. So I have put up something here that I'm going to be sharing with you guys, right? So you can see I have a description of JavaScript here, and I don't know if you can see this very well, but let me zoom in. All right. Let me know if this is if this is not clear enough on your screen. Let's see if I can make it bigger. All right. Okay, so I believe this is bigger. Someone is also saying I would like you to go over grid and flexbox. Okay, so please, JJ, please take that down as well. We can cover that in a later session. Okay, so yeah. And by the way, for those of you that are just joining, I gave an instruction there. If you have any challenge with maybe CSS, right? There's something difficult for you to understand, or for you to get a hang of when working with CSS, please drop it in the chat so that we can have it noted against the next time we meet on Discord. Um, yeah, we can cover that on Discord. If you're not on the Discord server, please make sure you join the Discord server so that if there's an activity happening on Discord, you'll get that alert. Okay. All right. Okay, so JavaScript is a scripting language that enables you to make your website more interactive. It runs on the client side, meaning it operates within your web browser. All right. And so I have some, basic description here. How do you get to run a simple JavaScript code? Before we get into writing some code, right, I'm simply going to show you how you can run JavaScript straight from your browser. Let's open up the browser again. So I have this empty document right here. When I right click on any empty space, right, just simply right click. You can click on inspect. When you click on inspect, just navigate to console. Okay. So straight from your browser, you have this feature that enables you write JavaScript code. So for example, I can simply say, 1 plus 1. Let's say we have 1 plus 1. You get an instant feedback 2, correct? And yes, you can also use some of the built-in functionalities of JavaScript. For example, if we want to print, we can simply say console.log hello world. Okay, so you see we have hello world right there. Yes, you can actually perform even more kind of operations here, but this is actually limited, right? And of course, we're using this straight from the browser. We're going to be using this straight inside VS Code, right? But if you're currently with your laptop, yes, you can practice along. Let me do that again. So simply right click, click on inspect, click on console, and then you can start, writing some basic code, 2 plus 2, giving us 4. You can say console.log, and we have hello world, I am a programmer. All right, so you have that printed instantly. Hello world, I am a programmer. Yes, we can actually start doing things like declaring variables. We're going to cover that shortly, right? But here you can see I can do something like let a equals 10. I put the semicolon to simply show that I'm writing a different line here. I can say let b equals 20, and I can then say let c equals a plus b, right? And I'll come back to explain what these things are. Okay, let statement you're seeing here, this keyword, right? I'll come back to explain this one after the other. For those of you that have never done anything related to programming, we'll take this from scratch, and I believe you would be able to understand what you're seeing here. Okay, so let's also say console.log. So this time around, I will just say console.log c, and now you have 30, right? A being 10, b being 20, and c being the sum of a and b, giving us the value of 30. All right, so that's quite, that's happening from the browser. This is already too much. Let's jump back into Excalibur, and we'll try to understand what exactly was happening with that simple script you saw, okay? So the first thing there was we said let a equals 10, okay? When declaring a variable in JavaScript, there are different ways to actually declare a variable. But the first thing you should be asking yourself now is what exactly do I mean by variable? So a variable. All right. So the best way to explain this, to keep it simple, I'm simply going to say a variable is a container that can hold a value. Okay. So I'm going to keep it that simple. It's a container that can hold a value. Now, right here, you see we have a container, a simple, shape. I'm using this to describe a container. And when I say this can hold a value, it means we can, basically put in some items here, right? We can also choose to change that item. Okay, we can replace that as well. All right. So which means the values that this can hold is basically dynamic, right? We can change that. Of course, studying JavaScript, that is what I am going to say here. If you're using some languages, there are some languages that will not allow you changes, automatically, but that's by the way. So in JavaScript, you can create a variable and then, put in a value. You can always come back and also change that value. Okay. Yeah. But back to the core concept, a variable is a container that can hold a value. Right now, when we say let a, we have declared a variable called a, right? A right here is the variable, and a holds the value of 10. So let's look at it from this angle. This is our variable right here. This is the variable. I think we should, okay, yeah, so this is the variable, and this is the value. For our example, the value is a number, but yes, you can actually have value with different types, right? We call them data types. We'll get to that. All right, so this is the variable, and then this is the value. By the way, if you are confused at any point, please raise your questions in the chat. I'm currently looking at the chat, so take any questions I see. Okay, so we'll get to cover, other ways to declare variables, right? But for now, let's try to understand what is happening here. So when we say let a equals 10, as I said, we have declared that variable, which is a. We have also added the value. Now, what if we say let a with a capital letter instead equals 10? You might be thinking that this is exactly the same. When it comes to working with JavaScript, it is actually case sensitive, which means if you have the small letter a right here and you have the capital A right here, they are two different things. Okay, so I can say a equals 20. If I print the value of a, this would give me 20. I mean the capital letter A. If I print the value of the capital letter, the small letter a, it's going to give me 10, right? This shows that whenever you're creating your variables, you have to be careful, with the use of, the capital letters and then the small letters. Okay, you have to always cross check, because if you create one with a small letter and then you assume that that would work as well in a different portion of your code, there's a tendency to get errors such as undefined, right? Saying that that variable was never defined. All right. Okay. So understand this. Variables are case sensitive, and also when creating variables, you shouldn't start with a number, right? So creating a variable and using names like maybe 1a, okay, that is not appropriate, right? That would not work. So your variable should start with you can use an underscore, you can use letters, for example, my name. And of course, when naming variables in JavaScript specifically, we follow a particular pattern called camel case, right? The camel case naming style. So camel case. So which simply follows this convention, right? So you see, I have my name, I have n looking like this. Okay, if you have used other languages, maybe like Python, you would have seen most people use the small case. Now, if I should use this in JavaScript, yes, it works as well. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with using this in JavaScript, but then sticking to that pattern, would basically you can basically follow this pattern in your code, right? And when you have a different developer work on your code, a different JavaScript developer, they can basically understand that, yes, this is the standard way of doing things, and I have to continue this way in the code. Okay. So working with camel case, I mean, this is quite good. But yes, if you eventually get to work with multiple languages, sometimes you might even forget to do this. Okay. So try to remember. I make mistakes at times. I forget to do this. It doesn't really affect the quality, right, or the function that you've built or you've written. It doesn't affect that feature. But this is just a standard, and I just wanted to mention that. Okay, so let me take that up for now. Remember, don't start your variables with a number. Start with an alphabet instead. Okay, and remember that your variables are case sensitive. All right. So back to the example you saw, I said let a equals 10. That was a line, right? That was a single line there, and I also created a different variable called b, right? And I said let b equals 20. And then I created a third variable, I call that c, and I said c equals a plus b, okay? So what happens here is that c is going to hold the sum of a, which is 10, and b, which is 20, which means wherever you see a, we are referring to the value of 10, and wherever you see b, we are referring to the value of 20. So now when you see c, we are referring to the sum of a and b, okay? All right, so let me see the charts. I can see some messages there. Okay, what's that? Uh, okay, that's not necessary. So let's move on. So we have A, B, and C. Okay, and now we can simply say console.log, and we have C. So basically, what console.log is doing in JavaScript, is to simply print. We use console.log for printing the values, right? The value we have right here to the console. Okay, so we use console.log basically for logging that value, right? For logging that value to the console. Console meaning your standard output. So we're going to try this same code, right, in VS Code, and we'll see how this would work. All right. So back to my okay. Let's move on to the code editor here. Most of you are already familiar with working with VS Code. By the way, you can use any other code editor, but we actually recommend and use VS Code most times in the class, right? So what did I do here? I created a very simple HTML file. So this is me just using the boilerplate, correct? Okay. And then I simply added a button, right? And I added an action. So this is the action here. I said on click action, right? Action is basically the name of the function that I created inside the JavaScript file. Okay. All right. So someone is saying, can I still write my name like this? My name? Yeah. I mean, that works. Okay. That would work. But, that is not specifically camel case. Okay. So camel case is the first one you wrote there, which is M starting with the small letter and then N with the capital letter in between. Now, the other one works quite all right. In fact, using underscore also works, right? So yeah. Okay, so someone said please re-explain the camel case. Okay, so camel case is just a way to, I would say, name your variables. I'm going to mention different cases, right? The first one we have is camel case, just like I just mentioned. So camel case, right? We also have what we call snake case. Now, when you see these naming styles, I think it's good that you are able to identify them, right? So we have camel case and snake case. These are very popular, right? Very popular options. I mean, when you're writing text, I'm sure you might have heard of this before, okay? Camel case and snake case. Now, in Python, this is what is recommended. In JavaScript, this is what is recommended, okay? So you simply, when you're thinking of maybe using combining two words or more words together, as a variable, right? So let's assume we're creating a function, or we're creating we need a variable to save our first name, for example. So instead of writing first name, you can simply write first name like this, okay? So small letter F and capital letter N, which is the second word that you're bringing to the first one, okay? So this starts with the capital letter, first name. Okay, so last name, let's say last name. All right. Maybe date of birth, for example, date of birth. Okay, right. Maybe uh, I don't know, state of origin, state of origin. Okay. All right. So you'll see this style, and this is pretty much the recommended way of writing variables. All right. Now that doesn't mean the other pattern doesn't work. It works. It works very well. But that is just uh, telling you the recommendation. Okay. So this works. Yeah. So if you use multiple languages, there's every tendency for you to probably write this way. Okay. So this is snake case, right? I promise this is snake case, and there's nothing wrong with snake case. I've mentioned that several times now. Okay. All right. So Christy, I hope I answered your question. Let's move back in here. So you see I have that button, right? Of course, this is HTML. So I have that button, and then I added that action right here. And if you look at this is my JavaScript folder, right? Or my JavaScript directory. And then I have the index.js in here. Okay. So within the index.js, I have a very simple function. But let's take off the function, for example. Okay, let's take off that function. Let's just write, the same code. Let a equals 10. We have let b equals 20. And then we have let c equals a plus b. And then we'll say console.log c. Okay. All right, let me zoom in. Hopefully you can see this. Please let me know in the chat if you can see my screen very well. Yeah, guys, let me know in the chat if you can see my screen. If this is clear. Okay, the font size. All right, beautiful. Okay. All right, so we have let a equals 10, let b equals 20. We have let c equals a plus b, and console.log c. All right, so I save this, Control S, of course, or you can simply go to File and Save, right? I'm using the shortcut, which is Command S on a Mac, Control S on a Windows. So when I save this and I open this page, right, because I already added that script here. This is how to basically import a JavaScript file, right? We use script, okay, and we can import this within the body. You can import this, in the head, right? I'm currently importing this in the body. So if I should go back to my browser and I visit that page, and I refresh that page, I did not create a function, that was directly inside the code, which means that was executed already. So you can see that was executed already. Immediately I refresh that page, it is right there because it was executed. Immediately I refreshed the page because this was put straight into the body, and then the JavaScript item as well did not really need a function call, right? It was just direct into the file. Okay, so I can change this. I can change this. Let's say 50 50. So that is going to give us 100. If I come back to that page and I refresh, you see we have 100 in here. Okay, so I'm sure you can see this, and I want to know if you have any questions. Please drop your questions in the chat before I proceed. If you have any questions, I have 61 of you on the call. If you have any questions, drop your question in the chat. All right then. So let's proceed. Okay, so let's come back to this file. So this will be shared with you, of course. This will be put on GitHub, and you can simply download this. Okay, right? What you're seeing here is also right here. What is JavaScript and JavaScript fundamentals? Okay, so let's see. Someone said it's not clear. Visuals, please. I don't think I understand that. If you can't see my screen, I think others can see my screen. Okay, all right. So this is basically how JavaScript can be used on the browser, which is exactly what I just what I showed you here. Okay, if you don't want to use a file, if you don't want to use a JavaScript file, yes, you can simply write that script right here. Okay, so the code that you saw us run the other time, we can simply include that here. Let a equals 10. All right. So you can also see let b equals 20 and let C equals A plus B, and we can have console.log C. All right. So without working with a file, we can also use this. And when you refresh, you're going to see that value as well here. All right. So someone said, why did it not print on the screen but in the console? Oh yeah, that is because we are currently using the console. Okay. So we are not looking at the document object model yet, which is done. We'll get to that. Okay, so we'll get to that. Someone said, Isaac, check your quality, change it to. Yeah, I mean, for Isaac that cannot see my screen, if you're using your mobile, change the quality of the YouTube, video. Okay, right. Okay, so for Promise asking why did it not print on the screen, but it was printing on the console, is because we're using the console.log. I want us to understand. Now, I want you to first understand JavaScript. Okay, so yes, be patient. You're going to get to the point where you use JavaScript on the DOM. Okay, so someone is asking, must you always add the log C? This is an example, right? That's an example. So someone also, okay, I think that's the same person. Christy is asking like the HTML tag. So Christy, you're going to get to the point where you, render the values such as the value of C in this example, or whatever value it is you have in your JavaScript code. You get to the point where you render that on the DOM. We call it the DOM, the document object model. So you can basically create maybe like a paragraph or a label, right, or a button, or some elements on your DOM, and then render the value of your JavaScript code into that particular element, right? So you can render the value of that code into that element. So say, for example, you have a label, right? You can actually, then render the value you have here into this label when you start, adding IDs, and we'll get to that, right? Don't rush, right? Just take your time, understand the language first. That's what we're doing here. We're going to first cover JavaScript as a programming language. You get to understand JavaScript as a programming language before we apply it into rendering items on the DOM. So yes. So someone said, is JavaScript basically about solving maths? Nope. JavaScript is for adding behaviors. All right. So, and by the way, we are not doing any math just yet. So calm down. Don't be scared. All right. So let's let's proceed. Okay. Back to this. You have seen how to run your JavaScript code right within the script tag, or bringing it in as a source file, right, as an external file. So this is how you basically bring in your JavaScript code as an external file. All right. And as for the syntax, we already looked at working with a variable, right? Um, and of course, this is a simple example of displaying alert. So an alert would simply look like this. All right, so I can simply say when this page loads, I simply want to show an alert and say, okay, welcome to our page, right? Something as simple as that. So that is basically working because we are rendering this on a browser, okay? So you see, this page says, welcome to our page, correct? Okay, so JavaScript is not just for solving math, but it's basically used for making your web page dynamic, right? So whether you are solving math or you are trying to alter the value that is presented on the DOM, after performing some checks or, adding some logic to your code. Yeah. So it's basically, summed up as a tool you can use for adjusting the behavior, right, of your web page. Okay. All right. So where does JavaScript run? Of course, JavaScript runs on the browser, and I said earlier that it can also be executed on a web server, which is the backend, right? And we have some frameworks out there. We're not going to discuss those ones for now, but you might have heard of React, Angular, Vue, right? On the backend, you also hear of Express.js, and a lot of frameworks. Okay. So yes, you can use JavaScript on the front end directly, right? In your HTML code, you can use it as a framework, and you can use it as a framework on the front end, right? With frameworks like Vue and Angular, and you can also use it on the back end for building your server-side applications. Okay, so that is it. And yes, before we move on to actually, understanding some of the basic concepts, I am going to be looking at the charts, right? So if you have any questions from what we've covered, please go ahead and ask your question before we then dive into other details here. Okay. All right. So I'll give you 2 minutes to do that. Ask your questions in the chats. You have 2 minutes to do that. Ask your questions. Okay, and by the way, as I mentioned the other time, if you are not on Discord, yeah, I mean, I would advise you also make sure you join the Discord server. Going forward, we're going to be having a lot of sessions, streaming primarily on Discord or Twitch, right? Some of those sessions are not, like the official classes. The official classes are basically twice a week, right? But then we're going to be having additional, streams going to Twitch. Okay, so it will not be on YouTube. So if you're on Discord, you'll get that a lot, right? You'll get a notification, and then you can easily, join in and learn. Okay, some of the revisions we're going to be taking, for example, those asking of explanations to grid and flex in CSS. Some of those things will be covered in that session. All right. Okay. So, do we need math to know Java? What we are covering here is JavaScript, by the way, not Java. Okay. So we're covering JavaScript and not Java. So someone is saying, and by the way, you don't really need to know math or to be good in math. Okay. So Bolo is asking, is it possible to change the alert from saying this page says to something else, or to remove it completely and display only the alert message instead? Yeah, well, basically you can actually configure the alert, the alert option you're seeing there. But in a more realistic case, you're going to find yourself using some libraries or probably designing your own alert system, right, to make it more presentable, obviously. Okay. So, is JavaScript like CSS that has a specificity? Nope. CSS is for styling. So, Christy, CSS is for styling. JavaScript majorly focuses on the behavior. Yes, you can use JavaScript to, like alter the style, right, of a particular element, but, you're still working on the behavior there because JavaScript is a programming language, right, that you are then using to target that element before altering the style. Okay. So CSS and JavaScript are two different things. JavaScript focuses on the behavior, CSS focuses on the styling, right? I hope that's clear. Okay, so let's move on to the next part here. And by the way, for those of you that yeah, for those of you that are just joining in, I can see we have some new numbers on the call already. What we are doing here is we're basically covering the fundamentals of JavaScript, right? The language, and by next week we'll be covering how to apply, some of the things you will learn from here, right, into changing the properties or the behavior of the elements you have on your web page. All right. So someone said the log in the console.log has nothing to do with maths. Oh yeah, sure. It has nothing to do with math. Okay. So the log right there has nothing to do with math. It basically describing, you're trying to log something down or write something down, okay, in the console. right, for this example that we gave here. Okay, so yes, this is a simple material that carries the definition of some of these terms alongside some examples to also show, what what the terms actually mean. Okay, yeah, because I received a lot of questions, especially when I explain and I use some of these terms, variables, syntax, and data type. People tend to ask, what exactly does the term mean? Okay, and that is why we have this material right here. You can also download this from the GitHub repository by the time we push it online, okay, to GitHub. All right. So when we say syntax, we're referring to the set of rules that dictate how programs written in a language, should be structured, right? So in JavaScript, for example, creating a variable like what we've shown before, you see we have the let. Let is a keyword that says, okay, we're about to define a variable, okay? um, and we have the variable name, and then we have the value. In this case, the value you're seeing here is a set of text, which is what we refer to as a string, but we'll get to that shortly. So whenever you see variable name, you're going to get the value of hello world. So long it has not been changed somewhere else in the code, whenever you see variable name, we're referring to hello world. Okay. And we now have console.log, which is, of course, what we've seen before. This is also a keyword that is used. It's reserved. Okay. This is a reserved keyword. It is already part of the language to say when we write console.log, this is going to basically print the value of that variable. As you can see, we are referencing that variable here, which is what you have right here. Okay, so this is going to basically take the value, which is hello world, and print that output to the console. Okay, all right, so we have also mentioned variables. We've covered the meaning of variables, of course. So this is a container for storing data values, right? And they allow you to name and store values for later use. Okay, so let age equals 25 means when you see age, the output is 25. All right, so these are all added to the code for now. But yes, when trying to use JavaScript and HTML, most times you are going to have what we call dynamic fields or dynamic values. Okay, so which means this can always change and you can make it dynamic based on the elements you're connecting to or the data source primarily, right? If you're using it on the web, it's going to be dynamic, right? If you want it to be dynamic, it's going to be dynamic. All right. So I mentioned data type. What exactly do we mean by data type? All right. So the data type specify the type of data that a variable can hold. All right. So JavaScript have several data types, including numbers, and of course, numbers right there would mean whole numbers and floating point numbers, right? So we call them integers, and floats or doubles in some other languages, but right here we basically group everything together as numbers. Okay, so if you have 30 or you have 30.5, right, they all fall under numbers. Okay, string. So string basically refers to text like this. So we have John. If we also have something, so long you put it behind a single or double quotes, right? If you have John is a programmer within that quote, then yes, that is also a string. Let's copy this and let's put this in our code right here. All right. So you see we have let name equals John, let age equals 30, and let is student equals true. So is student, this is basically a pattern we use in naming what we call Boolean values, right? Which is either true or false. So Boolean is to say, this is true or this is false, right? So for example, we're saying is student is true. So we can say, John is student, right? And we have the value of true, which says that, okay, John is actually a student. If this is false, then of course it means John is not a student, right? We're going to get to this point where we use this in practicality, but for now, this is a Boolean, right? True or false value, a number, which can be 30, 30.5, right? So it can be a whole number or a decimal number, right? Uh, Yes, and then we also have a string, right? So I mentioned you can have is a programmer. So this is a string, okay? And yes, if this is also like a single quote, this is also a string um, right here, okay? So this is a string. We'll get to work with strings. We'll get to work with adding multiple strings using what we refer to as a string literal, right? For concatenation. We'll get to that. That is simply a way to add multiple strings. So I can do something like this, right? I can add multiple strings, and I can also do some formatting with some additional, functions that JavaScript provides. But for now, let's just keep it simple. So this is a string. We'll get back to this. Okay. So that is a string. All right. So let's come back to this file. We have a number, and this is an example, right? So the number data type represents both integers and floating point numbers, all right? And we have 42, which is an integer. We have 3.14, which is a floating point number. They both fall under the category of the number data type, all right? Okay, so Maxwell is asking, can I get the GitHub link, please? Yes, after the class, you'll get the link, okay? After the class, you will get the link. All right, so we have a numerical separator. So basically, this is a separator that allows you to make your numerical values more readable. Okay, so someone is saying, sir, isn't the string supposed to be camel case? Well, the string you saw here, this is basically a comment, and we'll get to talk about that, right? I'll come back to this. So a comment is just trying to describe something in your code, especially to a different developer. JavaScript does not understand the comments, right? It's just for your own understanding to say, um, this is John's age, right? For example, right? We'll get back to this and I will try to explain that better, okay? But comments are not recognized by the language. In terms of working with the comment, it means nothing here. It's just a way to explain or to describe. So it doesn't really matter how that looks, okay? And by the way, even if you choose to do this, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to work, right? But we keep it like this, with small letters, just to follow, the best practice when it comes to the naming convention of our variables, okay? And if we have something like order names, then yes, following that naming pattern as well, this is camel case, okay? That doesn't mean that this doesn't work. It works, right? So just have that at the back of your mind, okay? So let's go back to what we have here, which is name. Let's go back to this file, and so back to the numerical, separator. If we have a number, let's say a value, let's call that salary, for example. So let's salary, and let's say we have John. So let's say John actually earns a salary of 1 million naira. So this is 1 million naira, right? And you basically want to make this, properly formatted, right? So that is where the number separator or the numeric separator, sorry, that's where the numeric separator comes in. So it allows you to properly format your numbers in such a way that it is, very visible, right? So you can see this clearly without straining your eyes to understand how many zeros you have here. You can basically use the numeric separator, and this is still seen as 1 million naira, right? Even when you print this, okay? So JavaScript still understands that this is 1 million naira. You only added this to, properly format, basically to properly. And by the way, this is just 1 million. There's no naira here for now, but you get the point because we're referring to salaries, okay? Someone is asking, how long is the class? Okay, so the class is meant to last for just an hour. Yeah, all right. It seems like you've not been to the classes before. All right. But yeah, so our classes are just an hour. Yeah, and if you're not okay, so that was just an example for the numeric separator. So we also have octal and binary literals, right? So these are basically ways to represent base 8 numbers. Okay, and for those of you saying I don't like math, I'm not going to dive deep into this, but yes, you can actually use this to represent, base 8 numbers, and you can also use this to represent, base 2 numbers. Okay, yeah. So we won't get deep into this for now. Probably talk about that in a different class. So I also mentioned Boolean already, right? I mentioned Boolean where we have is true or is false, and you can also use Boolean to state things like maybe you have is married, right? You're checking if you're checking is married, so you can have true or you can have false, right? So let's try. Let's just say um, a student, right, equals false, okay? Or you can have maybe something like is above 18, okay? So yeah, you can have something like this. But yeah, that's just an example. So you can have true or false, and those are referred to as booleans, okay? All right. So let's go back to this file. So booleans only have true or false values. Remember that. So does the number formatting add commas when we log into the console? Basically, it is not going to add the commas. There are libraries you can actually use to make it look like a money value, right? There are libraries you can use in making it look like a money value when you are about to when you are working with maybe currency. If you have the option, if you are working with a currency, if you're building a currency application, yes, there are ways to actually make it look like currency. But for now, it won't, right? It's a simple number, and you don't add commas to your number in mathematical operations, okay? On your computer, at least. All right. Okay, so speaking of string, right? A string is a data type that represents a sequence of characters. So I've shown some examples already. This is a different example right here. So we're keeping this simple. We're keeping this simple. So this right here is a string that says hello world, right? And this string is stored within the variable greeting. So which means when I print greeting, of course, I get hello world. All right, good. Okay, so we also have objects. And by the way, before I dive into primitive versus reference values, let us cover object, and then I would cover a tool that you can also use to run your JavaScript applications. I actually have that open on the browser already, but I'll get to show you how to download, and yeah, you would have to install that on your system. All right. So objects are complex data types that can store multiple key value pairs, right? Take note of this key value pairs. So this is an example. And in this example, oh, I think yeah, all right. So that's back. In this example, you see we have a person. So this is an object, right? And, we're basically using the key and the values, which are, of course, the key and the property here. So this is the property name, and this is the value, right? So this is the key, this is the value. So when you see name, we have John, age, we have 30. Now take a look at this. We use comma to show that we also have more items, okay? Not putting comma here actually gives you an error. So take note, when you have multiple items, and of course you put the comma, and the last item doesn't necessarily need that comma, right? Because there's no other item coming in. But putting it there does not mean it is wrong. This is also valid. But let's take it off because that is not necessary. So we have a person, with the name of John, the age of 30, and the Boolean value of a student to set to false. Okay. So yes, you can actually use an object to describe different things. So I would show a very simple example here. Say we have a car, right? So we have a car, just the way we have person. Now we have a car, and we can simply add some details about this car. So we can say color, for example, we have white, right? So you see the way we have it right here. And then, yes, you can continue with this. By the way, white is string. We can have maybe price, right? So we have the price here. And remember, you can always add your underscore to make this clear. Okay. And yeah, you can add even more details, maybe owner, right? If this is owned by, I don't know, maybe John, right? So John owns this car. You can add, multiple key value pairs in here. Okay. So take note of that. Looking at the chart, let's see if we have more questions. Okay. So we don't have any question for now. All right, so this is your objects. Now there are more details to some of these data types that have been shown here, right? We will get to talk about these details in a later class. We'll get to talk about the details. We have another class tomorrow to basically go in and cover some of the methods, right? So we can basically perform some actions. Given the specific data type, we have different actions that can work alongside that data type. So we'll cover those in the session tomorrow. Before we proceed to primitive and reference values in JavaScript, let us quickly go to my browser here, and you can see I have this website open, nodejs.org/en English/download. Okay, so basically you can also run JavaScript applications with Node.js, as I mentioned the other time, right? Basically on your server. But then when working with JavaScript, you can also run your JavaScript code with Node, okay? So if you're using Windows, click on Windows installer. If you're using a Mac, click on the Mac OS installer. If you're using a Linux, right, depending on the distribution, you would find different, binaries. So you can basically check this out or you can simply, Google that, how to install Node on maybe Ubuntu, CentOS, or Linux Mint, depending on the distro you're using. There are different ways with different package installers or managers to help guide the installation process. Okay, so of course, go with the long-term support, right? This is recommended for most users, LTS. So click on the option based on the OS that you use. Okay. So someone said how to download 32-bit APK. Oh, by the way, this is on your computer, right? You download this on your computer. Okay. There is no option for using this on your Android device. Okay. So you download this on your computer. All right. And yeah, let's continue. When you have this downloaded, I already have this installed. So all you have to do is click on this. It is going to download. You double click and then you follow the prompt to install, right? So it gives you, the regular prompt to install this. And then once you have this installed on your machine, you can simply run this from your terminal. So remember, you guys have probably used, you've probably used Git Bash, right? When you downloaded Git on your computer, for those of you using the Windows. If you're using a Linux machine, then yes, you know of the terminal, okay, or the shell, right? I am using a Mac and I have the shell opened up right here. But yes, I can come back to my computer here. You see, I have it right there. Okay, let me zoom in on this. Probably you'll see this well. Okay, you see, I have the terminal right here. All right, let's go back. So if I click on this, then yes, it actually opens. I can open a new instance here by just right clicking and selecting new window. So you see, I have a new instance here. You've seen me use this multiple times. So yeah, this is not really new to you, right? So I have it right here open on the side of my VS Code application. So I can go ahead to create a new JavaScript file, for example. Let's call this example one, right? Or example one.js, right? So this is example one.js. I can simply write console.log, hello world again. So this is just, to log to my terminal, of course. And from the terminal here, I can simply go to JS, right? Just to see that file. So now you see I have example one. So let me just move this to the top here. All right. So you see I have example one.js and index.js. So let's run example one.js. I just have to say node, right, which is the tool I already have installed, right? Example one.js. So the thing here is, by the way, forget about this. This is an error, right? This is an error coming from, by the way, I can quit. Let me just quit that. Okay. So I can just quit that, right? Give me a minute. Let me navigate to that particular code base. Let's navigate to that code base, introduction to JavaScript. Okay, and JavaScript. All right, so you see I have example one and index. Okay, example one and index. I can run this again by simply saying node example one.js. So you see I have hello world. Okay, so you can use this command node with the name of your file when you have installed node. All right, and yeah, for those of you that need the link, so I'm going to quickly drop this in the chat. Okay, so I've sent that into the chat now, so you can simply, download Node.js from that link. All right. Okay, so someone is saying, please, what's the essence of downloading the js.code? No, that is Node.js. That is Node.js. I sent the link to the chat. That is Node.js. So you're downloading that because you can actually use that to run your JavaScript code directly while you are learning. So you don't need to depend on running JavaScript on your browser. Okay, you can write your code, execute that, and you see it straight from your terminal. We're going to be using this in most of our classes because we're going to cover JavaScript as a programming language first so that you get to understand JavaScript in detail before we move into using JavaScript on the web, right? Which is basically using JavaScript on the DOM, the document object model. We're going to first cover JavaScript as a programming language so you can understand JavaScript very well as a language. Okay. Yeah, so it's already 9 p.m., but let's quickly take this. Yeah, Node.js, exactly. Okay, so in JavaScript we have a primitive and reference values. So primitive values basically fall under the data types like numbers and string. Okay, so they are stored directly in memory, while the reference values like objects and arrays, they store the references to the actual data, right, in memory. They store the reference to the actual data in memory. Okay, so we have a primitive value like this, let x equals 10. And right here we have a reference value in form of an array. Okay, so the thing about JavaScript arrays is okay, so basically a JavaScript array is a special variable that can hold multiple values in a single variable. So this is an example, right? And that is how you basically declare an array just like this. Okay, so we have a fruit and we have different types of fruit. Okay, yeah, so you have apple, you have orange, you have banana. We can simply choose to print everything, so we can simply say fruits. Now, as I said earlier, we're going to be covering the detail of each data type, the kind of action we can perform, things like maybe adding an item to an array, removing an item from an array, right? We're going to take this step by step. In tomorrow's class, we're going to go into the detail of each data type, right? We want to use it for something more practical. Do you understand that? We're going to use this for something more practical. If I should print this, let's go to the terminal there. You see we have the array printed. Yes, we can also, extend this to even add. So just take a look at this, right? Let's see. Okay, so if I run this, you see we can also include a number. So yes, we can have different data types saved into an array, right? So we can have a number, a floating point or a decimal point number. We can have, we can even have an object, right, stored inside an array. So you can basically store different type of values, right, inside an array. We're going to cover this in the next class. So someone is saying, please, how can I update my node to the latest? Is that your question? Okay, Node isn't working anymore. Maybe you can just go ahead and install it from your computer and then download the latest version from the website. If you are using a Linux machine or a Mac, you can run commands to basically update, right? But I'm assuming that you're probably using a Windows, and when you say it isn't working anymore, do you mean the command is not working? If that's what you mean, just go ahead and install it and then install it again. Okay. But if you already have it installed, even if it's an older version, the command should still work, right? So go ahead to your control panel, visit uninstall programs, right? And uninstall Node, then download the package from the website and install it again. All right. So we have looked at some of these data types. In the next class, which is tomorrow, we're going to dive in to basically perform some actions, on the data types, right? Adding or removing items. Okay. With strings, we're going to add multiple strings. We call that concatenation. We're going to perform different actions on each of these data types before we then move into working with functions and working with classes in JavaScript. All right. So this was a very beginner, very basic level session of understanding JavaScript. We'll continue from where we stop here tomorrow. Do have a wonderful night. Yeah. Bye. Thank you.